Hey Falcons, if you are watching this video, then we are going to be talking about the word marginalized today and thinking about the definition of marginalized and marginalized groups. So if you're watching this video, you've already clicked on this marginalized groups discussion board assignment, or this not discussion board, but this discussion assignment. I want you to click here and make a copy of that assignment, and when you do, it looks like this. I know it kind of looks funny to have this big box, but you'll kind of understand in a little bit more, a little bit later as to why that box is there. So the first thing that I want to point out is that it does say a hint. You may need to zoom in on this assignment. So remember that you can zoom in by either just clicking here and clicking as many times as possible, or you can also choose, like you can say 50 or 100. 100 will probably work. Make sure though that once do you see how my little cursor looks like a magnifying glass? Once you have done that, you want to make sure that you go back to your arrow. So you either want to zoom in on this, or you may want to print this page and physically write on it for this assignment. So I'm going to kind of let you decide. But the directions here say fill in the blanks for each section in the margins of your paper. Do not write inside the box while we're doing this, and you cannot go off the page. So you can't allow these text boxes to go far off the page, okay? So you're gonna have to think about that as you're working, but you'll fill in each of these sections in the margins here as we go through this slideshow, okay? So here is the slideshow. So marginalized groups. We're going to be talking about this as it relates to our project a little bit later on and how that's going to fit into what we're doing, okay? But we want to first just make sure that we understand what the word marginalized really means. So before we start in on the definition, what words do you see within the word marginalized that you know, and what do they mean? So I want you to pause this video for a second and think about that. What other words do you see? Okay, hopefully you paused and you thought through that. One word that I notice right off the bat is the word margin. Whoop, I'm gonna go back. Is the word margin right here, right at the very beginning. And I think about margin when I think about a piece of paper, and the margins on a piece of paper are the outsides, the edges, okay? I also see marginal, which makes me feel like, okay, outside. And then you've got marginalized, which is also something that I've heard. So I'm not 100% sure what I think marginalized means, but I wonder if it has something to do with that first base word of margin, or the outside, okay? So marginalized is an adjective, a person, group, or concept treated as insignificant or peripheral. Think about your peripheral vision. Your peripheral vision is on the side. Okay, it's what you can see that's out here. It's not right in front of you. It's on the side. It's the outside. Okay, to be marginalized, or the word marginalize, is to treat a person, group, or concept as insignificant. So it's that idea that if you are marginalized, you're a group of people that are not treated the same as everybody else. Okay. And again, it's kind of that thought process of the outside, the margin. So marginalized groups feel like they're on the outside of society. Okay, so marginalized groups. Marginalized is used to describe the experiences of those who live on the fringe of mainstream America. A marginalized group is a group of people that does not enjoy the same privileges as that of the rest of society. Such persons are systematically excluded from full participation in the American dream and consequently lack the self-efficacy to improve their life situation. Their access to the various social, cultural, economic, and political aspects is very limited when compared to mainstream society. They do not enjoy the same privileges as the rest of the society. Okay, so before we go too much further, I want to kind of jump over to our assignment here. Our assignment here, up here at the top, it said to record your definition. So I want you to type here the definition of the word marginalized. So go back to that first part here and feel free to pause, but I want you to write down that definition of marginalized, okay? Okay, and then you'll also notice that we just kind of read about marginalized groups. So now that we understand that the word marginalized means to be treated as insignificant, then we talked about how marginalized relates to a group of people, okay? The group of people does not enjoy the same privileges as that of the rest of society. So if you kind of notice over here, you might have to turn your head to the side. This is why printing it might be better. Turn to the head side. Do you notice how it says fill in the blank? And it's right there. It reads the same thing. Marginalized is used to describe the experiences of those who live on the fringes of mainstream America. A marginalized group is a group of people that, and you'll type right there, okay? So what did this definition say? Marginalized is a group of people that does not enjoy the same privileges as that of the rest of society. Okay, so you'll want to type that right there, and then you'll want to continue to fill in the blanks. What are some of these other blanks based off of that definition? Now, if turning your head sideways like this is really starting to hurt, you can always take that little dot right there and turn this to fit here. Okay, you can read it that way, and then you can turn it back to fit on the side of your paper. Okay, so I'll show that to you one more time. You can turn this like this. Okay. You can fill it in, and then you can turn it back. And it's that simple. All right, then, as we continue going here, some common types of marginalized groups. I'll let you kind of look through that. And then again, remember you need to add that to the bottom of your paper. And then let's talk about how they're treated differently. So people living in extreme poverty, if we think about those 4 different ways that people are treated differently if they're in a marginalized group, we think about social, cultural, economic, and political. People living in extreme poverty in a social aspect are often ignored. They're looked down upon. They're seen as a nuisance. People don't tend to want to help them because a lot of people are like, well, they should be able to help themselves. Go get a job. And so they're looked down upon and they're frowned upon. And we tend to ignore them, and we tend to feel like, oh, my hard-earned tax dollars are going to go towards people living in poverty. Okay. So that's kind of that idea that people have. And we have to think about this a little bit differently. Cultural, they don't necessarily have the same traditions, if any. If they're living in extreme poverty, I think about the Christmas holiday. Do you think that they have the money to go buy Christmas presents or put up a Christmas tree? And their strengths are not celebrated, okay? Economic, you have to have money to get a job. On a resume, you have to be able to put an address and a phone number, and you have to look nice in an interview. You have to be able to get there. So all of those things take money. Even if you don't own a car, you still have to buy a bus pass or a bus ticket. So it costs money to go get a job, which then goes back to they're not able to get a job. So then political, if they are in extreme poverty, they might not have an ID because they can't afford to go get one. If they don't have an ID, then they can't vote, okay? And then their voice isn't represented and it's not heard in our society, okay? So how are they treated differently? In social, cultural, economic, and political, that's how they're treated differently, okay? So again, make sure that you're adding that to the side over here as to how they're treated differently. All right, and again, I'll remind you one more time, if it's really hard to turn your head sideways like this while you type, remember that you can turn that the other direction, type, and then turn it back. Okay, so after you've had to turn your head from side to side, if you wrote in pencil, it was probably really hard because you had to write really, really, really small, and you couldn't go off of the edge of the paper. If you typed this, you had to kind of, you know, hurt your neck just to see it. So was it difficult to only write in the margins of your paper? Why or why not? Type your answer right here. Was it difficult to only deal with the margins of your paper? And then how does this activity, the writing of the margins, related to those who are marginalized in our society? So I forced you to only write in the margins for this activity. And how did that relate to marginalized groups in society? And write your answer there. And then when you're done, please make sure that you submit this. So I'm going to go back through that slideshow one more time so that you can see it, okay? Please pause when you need to finish filling out that assignment. Marginalized groups. The main word, that base word that we see is margin, which is the outside, like the margins of your paper, okay? Marginalized is an adjective, group of people or person, people, or concept that's treated as insignificant or peripheral, okay, on the outside. And marginalize is a verb. To marginalize is to treat a person, group, or concept as insignificant, okay? So again, think about on the outside. And then we talked about marginalized groups are a group of people that do not enjoy the same privileges as the rest of society. Such persons are systematically excluded from full participation in the American dream due to social, cultural, economic, and political aspects. All right, make sure that you get that assignment turned in and let me know if you have any questions.